that there's no way he would allow the inflation that got him elected, the inflation that ran quite hot under Joe Biden, he wouldn't let there be another surge in US inflation just before the US midterm election. So people, I think, were betting on that. And then they sort of woke up to the reality of there being no tankers going through the Straits of Hormuz and panicked a bit.
The veteran American politician Tip O'Neill once declared that all politics is local, meaning that if you want to win elections, you should focus on stuff like potholes and bin collections. It's been a rule of thumb for many a successful campaign on both sides of the Atlantic. Our equivalent is the old Harold Wilson idea that what really matters to the British public is the value of the pound in your pocket. I think that events are demonstrating that if O'Neill and Wilson were ever right, they aren't now. Pretty much all politics has become global. This morning, all eyes are on the oil price, which will determine whether the cost of living here goes up faster or slower. Last night, Mr. Trump said that the war is almost over. And this morning, his Secretary of War told the world that today would see the most intense battle, but that by tomorrow, the worst would be over. It'll all be wrapped up. Well, in response, the markets have calmed down a little, but whether that calm persists depends on what the Americans, Israelis, Iranians and Arabs now do. And the stately progress of British ships to the Middle East seems unlikely to make a jot of difference. Next Saturday, London streets will be filled by the annual Al-Quds March, an international Muslim demonstration expressing support for Palestinians and opposition to Israel. Al-Quds is an Arabic reference to Jerusalem. Some people think that the march should be banned. Again, it's conflict on our streets about something taking place thousands of miles away. Even the government's social cohesion strategy is really a response to the deep divisions opened up by the October the 7th atrocity in Israel and the Israeli assault on Gaza and now the West Bank. Well, why does all this matter? Well, because increasingly we need to ask the question, are we paying the price of decisions taken in Washington, D.C., over which we clearly have little or no influence? Didn't someone once complain about taxation without representation? Perhaps it's a sign of the New World Order that the question asked 250 years ago by the American colonies now has to be plaintively uttered by their former masters. If you've seen the musical Hamilton, you'll know what I mean when I say that what matters is being in the room where it happens. Looking at the last week or so, it feels like our government hasn't even got the codes to the room where the decisions get made. Under the Emperor Donald Trump, are we now the colonial supplicants, watching our fate being determined by others? This is Trevor Phillips on Times Radio. Well, as I said, markets have responded positively to President Trump's remarks overnight, which said the war with Iran will end very soon. And his Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, has been giving a news conference this morning and, as I implied, sounded pretty upbeat.
Today will be, yet again, our most intense day of strikes inside Iran. The most fighters, the most bombers, the most strikes. Intelligence more refined and better than ever.
That was Pete Hegseth, who also said that the U.S. was crushing Iran. Well, the price of oil is now closer to $90 a barrel, which is still well above the pre-war levels. Yesterday, it was up above $100 a barrel. Let's talk to Dominic O'Connell, Times Radio business correspondent, who knows all about this stuff. Dominic, the markets have cooled slightly. Does that mean that we think that the war isn't going to last very long?
I don't think we know how long the war is going to last, really. And actually, there's been quite a bit of yo-yoing around of the oil price, $93 a barrel at the minute, but we did go as high as $116 early yesterday morning. And earlier today, it dropped as low as $86 a barrel before coming back up again. And all this yo-yoing is to do with Donald Trump and his comments about the war coming to an end very soon, or further attacks on Iran, which he mentioned later last night. So I don't think anybody really knows. Maybe Trump knows, but there is a lot of uncertainty. And we had a bit of a sort of an air of unreality about the market response last week when the oil price really didn't do a great deal until we had that really big spike over early on Monday morning. And I think because most people thought, as has happened in other with other Trump-led sort of interventions in the market, that it would be quite short-lived, that there's no way he would allow the inflation that got him elected, the inflation that ran quite hot under Joe Biden, he wouldn't let there be another surge in US inflation just before the US midterm election. So people, I think, were betting on that. And then they sort of woke up to the reality of there being no tankers going through the Straits of Hormuz and panicked a bit. And now they're back down again. But in terms of how long it will last, I don't think we know.
What's your gut feeling here? Is what he said last night, Mr. Trump said last night, and what Pete Hegseth is saying today, is that what they really believe? Or is that because they've been spooked by the $100 a barrel number?
Well, I think possibly the latter. I mean, Trump does care about markets, but he cares about inflation being visited on the US consumer, because while the US is largely self-sufficient in energy, it's an oil exporter and certainly a big liquefied natural gas exporter, it still pays the going rate for oil, at least. Gas is a bit of a special case. So it will be reflected in the cost of manufactured goods that American consumers pay, and in their airfares. I mean, American airlines do not hedge their oil prices, their fuel prices, as opposed to European airlines. So I think he will be definitely thinking about that, and a shorter war is a lot better, notwithstanding his comments about $100 a barrel being a price worth paying for peace, as he put it.
Rachel Reeves apparently has been speaking in the comments today. There was some suggestion, partly by me in an interview I did a weekend, that she might want to cancel the planned 5p increase in fuel duty. What are you hearing?
Well, she didn't do that. She said these things would be kept under review. And of course, she does have a budget coming up in November, and has said that she only wants one fiscal event a year. It'd be very easy for her to cancel the planned rise, which is only one. She's going to phase this 5p increase in over a number of years. It's only 1p a litre from September. So that would be quite an easy one to put on hold, although it would eat into her fiscal headroom. I think her bigger concern will be if the oil price stays high for a long time, then inflation in general becomes much more of an issue for the UK economy, and interest rates will fall a lot more slowly. And the effect on consumer sentiment and the general economy and growth will be a big concern for this government, I think.
One way in which all of this can be calmed down is that the G7 countries release enough oil, and we don't have to turn to Russia and so on and so forth. There's an argument, I think, that's being made that actually the Americans quite like all of this because they've got a vast release from the fracking that they're doing, and that there won't be an agreement in G7 to calm the market. What do you think?
Well, I think the G7 release of a coordinated release of their strategic reserves, which everybody thought actually would probably happen yesterday, or at least some kind of agreement about a timetable, that didn't happen, which is a bit surprising. That's more of a sentiment thing than a reality thing, I think, because releasing these reserves takes a while. Some of them are actually behind the Straits of Hormuz, up in the Gulf. Others are. I mean, Japan has very big reserves that it can release for its domestic economy. But there was no coordinated action yesterday, and I think really that was about sending a signal as to what the G7 economies would try to do to keep oil prices down. It's more about intent than reality. I think Russia is a very interesting thing. Whether he de-escalates it, takes some of the sanctions off Russian tankers, he's already done it for India. He might try and do more of that to try and help out China. Will help out Vladimir Putin as well, of course, who he spoke to last night. And there probably is going to be some sanctions lifting in the meantime. But I think the question is, we really don't know. There aren't tankers moving through the Straits of Hormuz. There have been a couple who've run the gauntlet, but at the moment, this fall on the oil price hasn't quite been borne out by any underlying change in the nature of reality.
Dominic, we will be listening out for you because you're following the twists and turns of this better than anybody else, I think. But that was Dominic O'Connell, Times Radio business correspondent.